Hello, and welcome to another edition of To the Point, very generously produced by the American Acupuncture Council. Today, on this cold spring day, I am really excited to have a guest. Lita Herman is an alchemical healer and a TCM teacher. She has a podcast called The Inspired Action, and she's an author of several books. One is Through the Mystery Gate, also The Energy of Love, Connecting Your Circle, and the Big Little Guasha book. And she's just a delight. She has a training center for her alchemical work called the Alchemy Learning Center. And we had a nice long discussion by phone about her work. And I think you're really going to be interested. Many of you are really going to be interested in this kind of work. So we're calling this Entering the Mystery of Alchemy with Chinese Medicine. And Lita, please, introduce yourself. Say hello.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me, Virginia. And thank you to the American Acupuncture Council for having me here. I'm thrilled to share this information with you in any way I can. It's exciting.
Yeah, now we hear the word alchemy tossed around a lot, and some of us have studied it with Jeffrey Ewan, for example. And it really kind of transcends just Taoism. And but how do you define alchemy, or how are you looking at and trying to practice alchemy?
Yeah. So I think of alchemy as a very generic word. And as you know, there's alchemy in the West as well as the East. So it's a very broad word that generally means transformation. But because of the studies that I'm doing in alchemical Chinese medicine, I would like to define it a little bit more narrowly, and in terms of saying that alchemy in Chinese medicine is this idea that we're all perfect, we just don't know it, and we need to, like, as human beings, we're here to evolve, we're here to have experiences, and we're here to, maybe even the Taoists would say, fulfill a curriculum of this lifetime. And alchemy is about transformation in a big scale, on a big scale. And it's about how can we ask ourselves better questions about who we are? How can we take a journey along in our lives so that we can continuously evolve? And I think it's equivalent somewhat to the Buddhist enlightenment idea, where Buddhists are trying to sort of achieve something called enlightenment. And in Taoism, we're trying to achieve something that would be called a realized human being, a Jen Ren. And that's a person that's like a sage or a wise person who basically is approaching life very differently than the average person. And there's a long tradition in China of Chinese medicine healers who have done this, like Sun Si Miao and Ge Hong, but others as well who were the Eight Immortals, for example, that a group
Mhm.
of people, and there were others as well, that groups of alchemists who got together and they were working on their own evolution.
Yeah, and that's what it's all about. Um, so I know that we both not only studied with Jeffrey Ewan, we both studied plant spirit medicine. That's a rather rare esoteric subject. How do you bring that into this work, or do you? Are you doing it more in a Taoist way? Is it a fusion of things?
Well, it's funny because I studied plant spirit medicine, which is truly a shamanic technique, even though it came out of the five element acupuncture tradition. It basically sort of incorporated the shamanic traditions with acupuncture and came up with a new kind of medicine from that perspective. Of course, plant spirit medicine has been a native medicine for, eons. But so I studied that first, and then I went on to study with Jeffrey Yuen and really, delve deeper into the alchemy concepts. And then much later, Jeffrey Yuen started teaching shamanism as well, which was just very interesting to me because I've obviously been attracted to the esoteric since day one. And I've always been working with people where I felt like I really wanted to get to the root of their problems. It's like they didn't feel well or they had emotional issues. And I always wanted to find what is that root of the problem? What is the psychological, mental, emotional, spiritual root of those problems? And both plant spirit medicine and alchemy are about that. So I think that's why I've been attracted to those different approaches.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I know the work that I did with plant spirit medicine was really probably the most profoundly transformative work that I did, despite a lot of, meditation and other kind of traditions and practices. And I had done shamanic work as well, but it was something, it was, for me, it was the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak, on certain issues and traumas that I had. And so I'm really, eager and curious to see how you work, and whether it doesn't matter whether or not you bring that into it, because I know from reading, your book, the which is entering the, what is it? Which one is it? The Through the Mystery Gate, that you have had amazing, amazing results with patients. Very transformative. Not just getting rid of just physical pain, but getting at the root of very deep issues. And
Yes.
I'm really, yeah, excited to learn more about that. And so, actually, since we're talking about treatments, how, what is your treatment like?
Okay. Well, I have sort of two kinds of treatments. One is a set of treatments that are just hour to 2 hour long treatments that people do over a very long period of time. It's called the 9 stages of alchemy, and that's really about cultivating your passion in life, your full potential in life. I say the goal is to really get you to fly in your life. So that's all of the kind of forward looking, this is where I'm headed work. But before we do that, there's a lot of the past, and we say a lot of skeletons in our closet, a lot of things that haunt us from the past or that are hooked into us and won't let go. And so that's where we do longer sessions. We do basically, we devote a whole day to someone's healing in that perspective. And the most common one we do in that case is the 13 ghost points. And the 13 ghost points is about those hooks. They use the word ghost, which it doesn't mean you're haunted by an entity. It could just be you're haunted by the past. It could be that, someone did something to you, or you had an accident, or you just had a really difficult childhood or some kind of abuse scenario. And those things, uh, you're not free in your life because those are hooked into you. And
Mm.
so we basically have like a whole day where we do the 13 ghost points. It usually takes somewhere between 4 to 6 hours. And we just give someone the time and the space and the honoring of what they need to let it go, to really, truly let it go. And it is transformational. Like I've had
That's
people,
phenomenal. And also, your head is not into the mentality of like, oh, keeping on the clock and the next patient. And, you can really dive
yeah,
in very deeply with people. That's beautiful.
it's beautiful work. And people always say, aren't you more tired after you do a long day like this? And I say, no, actually, I'm less tired because I'm not switching 8 times in the day, changing, getting people in and out of the room, etc. I'm just devoted to that person for the day.
Yeah, that's one of the things I like about the facial rejuvenation acupuncture that I do, because I try to make it a transformative treatment. Um, but it's like I'm just with someone for a couple hours, and you can
Mhm.
just slow down and just, I don't know, you just, for me, I need that time
Yeah.
to go more deeply with someone than, maybe
Yeah.
some people could just go in and give them a look and change their life. But yeah, I think also for the patient, they feel more cared for and can really open up and relax into the change. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
beautiful.
it's wonderful, and the changes are pretty dramatic, like, sometimes it's right in the treatment room, where someone will say, "Oh my god, the monkey's off my back," like, "I feel it," or, and they truly mean it, like, they come back in
Mm.
after that, and they're like, "My life has completely changed." Sometimes someone's voice will literally completely change, they might have a really high voice, and suddenly now it's a lower voice, or I've had people who the ghost points are really interesting where I didn't even know they smoked and that was an issue for them. But like a month or so later, they're like, I don't know why, but I just stopped smoking and I wasn't even trying. And it was like,
Oh,
well, maybe that's because you were smoking because of this thing that basically were carrying around. It was latent in your body and now it's gone and you don't need that habit anymore. You don't need to smoke to kind of deal with it, that pain.
do you work with any prenatal trauma or issues?
Oh, absolutely. There's another treatment that I do called the nine heart pains. And in the nine heart pains treatment, we begin with utmost source, heart one. And that is supposed to be related to pre-birth. So in terms of just like what you're coming in with, what we're basically a human being that's incarnating, and that point is representing this start of a new incarnation. And what's all the baggage that might be there in the very beginning in
Mm,
utero? So
wow,
that
that's
would be an
that's great.
example.
So, can you talk about so when somebody comes in, how does the treatment go?
Well, I like to start with a little kind of ritual that I do with people, which is just talking and then having them pick a poem out of a book, having them pick a card out of a deck of cards, just to break the ice and get, even if I know them well, it's just they might be nervous, they might be anxious
Mm.
about getting there. They just settle into something very simple. And then they get up on the table and, I take pulses and we do something really unusual in these treatments. We have an iPod or some kind of playlist with 20,000 songs on it, and we shuffle it. And they're of all genres. And the idea is we're trying to simulate how things were done in the ancient times where they had live musicians, which I was really fortunate to see a similar type of event at Maoshan in China when we went there with Jeffrey Yuen, where these musicians were just playing this live improvisational music, and there were cymbals and all kinds of instruments I don't even know the names of, but that music was very emotional. It emoted things from people, like people had tears running down their face. And so we're here, we don't really know Chinese music as much. I have Chinese music on my playlist, but it's more than that. It's like we need music that we can identify with. So I put every genre I could think of, good, bad, whatever your opinion is about music. We have it all, and we don't segregate. We don't try to limit it in any way. And so what we're doing is just allowing the music to vibrationally move the treatment along. And the treatment itself is a vibrational technique. It's about shaking up stuck patterns. All alchemy is vibrational in the technique. And so it's really about stimulating something that has been stuck and trying to really evoke more than just transformation. I like to say transmutation, something really, stronger than a slow evolutionary change.
And are you using needles, or is it more energetic or more
I
hands-on healing?
I have I you can do needles or not needles, and I personally do not use needles for alchemy. I use my finger as a needle, and the idea is, I don't want the separation of between me and the person of the needle. So energetically, my finger becomes the needle. So I just call it non-needle needling. And I always recommend my acupuncture students attempt to do some of these treatments with needles and without, and then they can choose how they want to do it. It's a little more challenging to do some of these treatments with needles because in some of the treatments, the needles are retained and there are needles on the front and the back. So that it's a logistical issue. And it has been done. It's not that it can't be done, but there is an issue of, if you have 4 to 6 hours on the table, the person's going to have to go to the bathroom. What are you going to do about the knee? So there's a lot of complexity that gets removed if you do the non-needle needle technique.
And then you're probably more apt to use your intention and you transmit your chi than just relying on the needles to do the work.
Exactly, exactly. And I really don't recommend, in general, I've had people who have gone to acupuncturists and received the ghost points, and they did it kind of like in a traditional stick the needles and leave the room. I don't really ever recommend that because it's such a powerful emotional shift that it really needs to be the what I talk to people about is becoming an alchemical healer is really walking the walk with the client. So you have to be in the room. You have to be not only just not sticking the needles in and leaving the room, but each needle could take an hour to insert. If, I mean, that would be extreme, but it could, because it takes that long for that person to allow the shift to happen. So you have to think of it in a totally different way. Becoming an alchemical healer is really different than just, how we've been taught Chinese medicine in general.
Mm. And now I understand even better why you're doing it without needles. Yeah, that makes sense. And so, can you talk a little bit more in detail about the 9 stages of alchemy?
Yeah,
And
so the
what are your
ninth,
treatment approaches, for
yeah,
different
yeah.
or
It's
strategies?
actually my favorite work. I mean, the ghost points are very dramatic and they really shift people in a huge way. And it feels like a miracle often every day in my clinic when I watch people walk out the door completely transformed. I mean, that's beautiful and I love that work. But that's trying to get rid of something that has been baggage for them, that's not about them, that they're just trying to unload. And then when you do the 9 stages of alchemy, it's like, how can you almost become more precious, like a metal that's being polished and polished until it's, beautiful. And I feel like, we're all a little bit tarnished and we need a lot of polishing, right? But in there is something really precious. And so the 9 stages of alchemy is just taking one step at a time. And I like to say that you can invent your own alchemy. There's no right or wrong way to do it. I just like to say there's some really wise, old, ancient Chinese people that said, hey, if you do it in this order, it works really well. So, stage one is a treatment that we do that's just about ease. It's about creating more ease in your life. And so, you do this treatment maybe quite a number of times. You might do it over a whole year with someone where they're just getting to a state of ease. Now, imagine you might have someone who already is there. So, you don't need to do a lot in that stage. Maybe you do it once or twice or 3 times, and then it's like, well, there's not much happening here because you're already there. You've done that work. So then you move on to the next stage. And the next stage is about, I call it the best protections, no protection. It's about all the armor we wear. And we don't ever, ever, ever want that bad thing to happen again. And so we're always on the lookout for it. We're always checking for it. And it's tiring, it's exhausting to live that way. And so, what would happen if we removed that protection because we're so good in ourselves? And if someone throws a dart at you, you just dodge it. It's not about you, it's about them. They're having a bad day, and you can see that. And so once you start to step into stage 2, you're no longer protecting. And then stage 3 is about all that prenatal stuff. It's about the ancestors stuff. It's about your past lives. So we need to unload that. And then stage 4, 5, and 6 are where all the fun begins, because you get to be, you get to be free of all that stuff, and you literally start to shine. You start to look like a light being. And stage 4 is about being like a child. Stage 5 is about channeling and listening to the world and being like a wise person. And stage 6 is about really truly flying in your life. In fact, some of the immortals were purported to fly as late as in the 1950s. People said they saw them flying. So, the movie, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, that's not supposed to be just fictitious. It's supposed to be real. And so what I like to say is I haven't seen anyone levitate off my table yet, but I expect for them to do it at some point. But they start to fly in their lives. And that's really magical to see. It's like, yes, like taking off on a runway. It's like, maybe some people have been taxiing a long time, but they just haven't been able to get liftoff. And a lot of this work is about that. And it's about living what we call in our podcast, the Inspired Action podcast, we talk a lot about Wu Wei. And stage 6 is about what is sometimes translated as non-action, but I like to call it inspired action. How do you live that kind of spontaneity in your life where you're just free and easy and just, basically looking at the footsteps in front of you that are already there, and all you have to do is put your foot in them, put your foot in them, put your foot in them. You're good to go. So that's
Well,
alchemy.
I like that, flying in your life, because that's really more important than, developing some yogic city, some power, that, I know I had a teacher who used to say, these people that spend all this time and energy, trying to levitate, even if it's just like, you know, a few inches or a foot off the ground. And if they use that for, more of their inner development or for helping, world peace or something, how much more useful that would be. And so, yeah, I like that idea of people flying in their life. It doesn't have to be something literal, and that it
Yeah,
doesn't even have
exactly.
to be that doesn't even have to be the goal, any literal flying. It probably
Yes,
would just happen if somebody
right,
reached a certain stage.
right.
Yeah.
Yes, that's how I look at it exactly. And like I said, I would love to see it literally, but I just like to see it as someone living their full potential and it, just really not held back by all the things that hold us back.
Yeah. And so what about 789? Are
Yeah,
there
well, interesting that you ask. So I decided a long time ago that I can only go as far as how far I've gone. And so I'm
Mhm.
working on stage 7. And you know, I believe that in stage 7, you have to really go into the caves, so to speak. You have to retreat from the world to do that level of work. And it's really about morphing. It's really transforming in a big way. And in ancient times, in for example, when I went to Huashan, there are caves there where people are basically living inside the cave for many months at a time. People bring them some water through a hole or maybe a little, cracker or two, but they're basically in there until they figure their stuff out. And so the idea is, I haven't I'm still very much in the world and I'm still like living a stage 6 life. And I want to kind of keep working on my stage 7. And so therefore I don't really want to take anyone else through stage 7, 8, and 9. So 7 is about this idea that you can morph, you can completely transform yourself. Stage 8 is that you can become like a ninja, you can become invisible. And stage 9 is that if you become invisible, you need to learn how to reappear if you want to. And so, there is a story of Gahung when we went to Gahung's mountain, where he basically was surrounded by all his apprentices, and he suddenly like vanished, and his clothes fell to in a pile on the ground. And so he never came back that I am aware of or that I've been told. So I mean, he obviously could still be
Mhm.
immortal walking this plane, but the his idea of immortality wasn't necessarily that you had to come back, that you just needed to transform into
Hmm.
some other some other dimension.
Yeah. Well, also in India, they say, if you reach a certain stage of enlightenment or development, that you have a choice whether or not you come back to incarnate. And
Yeah.
that third answer is you do come back to serve.
Yes, and
Right, but
that's what
not
we
out of
talk
your
about.
own
Yeah,
needs and desires and unfinished business.
yeah, yeah. And yeah, yeah. And we say that at stage 9 is like being a bodhisattva. You know, you come back for the benefit of all. I'm here.
Well, actually, maybe because of the tech issue, it's a time to, maybe it's a sign to conclude this. But I would like to have you back and have you talk about the starry sky points and the 9 heart pains and I mean, there's so much more we could talk
I
about.
know we
So,
could talk a
um,
lot about it all.
yeah. So,
Are
if
we
unless there's anything you want to say in conclusion.
uh okay? All right. Well, I was thinking that in terms of alchemy and just alchemical healing, in terms of like people who are doing acupuncture that are interested in delving into these concepts, it is like a different roadmap for people. It's really about, you know, am I interested in cultivating myself in terms of my own alchemy? Am I interested in becoming an alchemical healer because I want to transform as much as I want my clients to transform? And so I really look at this as kind of like, first, what about me, the practitioner? And I really came to that conclusion because in the beginning I didn't really think of it that way, and it took me a while to understand a lot of this through my own cultivation. So as I did more and more work with this, I transformed much more quickly than I think I would have on my own. So I say to practitioners that every single time you do like a ghost point treatment or one of these treatments, the sign that you're actually doing it well is that you transform as much as the client. And I know
Mm.
that all of us have that experience of like that big aha moment when the client shifts and then you shift as a result. But it's way more apparent in alchemy. It's really about not only the client but the practitioner themselves. And I don't mean that in kind of a selfish way at all. I mean, you're not doing it so that you can transform, but that's one of the things that happens.
Well, that's I always say that people can memorize the classics in Chinese and what have you, but if they haven't cultivated themselves spiritually and psycho spiritually, and if they haven't learned to cultivate their chi, then there's limitations on what you can do for people. Um, but if you've done those other things, it can transcend anything that you can find written, modern or ancient.
Yes, and so that's why one of the things that we are doing is we have a website called the Alchemy Learning Center, and there's an app as well called the Alchemy Learning Center. And what we're doing is we're putting a lot of these teachings into a format that people can do on their own. So there's things for both lay people and acupuncturists, and there's just very simple qigong, as an example of things that you can do to build your qi. But there's also things about deeper level of the 5 elements and how to understand ourselves on a very deep level, because if you're doing alchemy you really need to know who is my authentic self, energetically, but also in all different ways. And we talk a lot about the 9 palaces, which we also, you know, did a lot of teaching in, that's available there. And then we have something called the Master Alchemy Program, and that
Mhm.
is for apprentices. We have 2 programs now. We've because of people coming from all over the world, so we have a virtual one, and then we have an in-person option where you can come to the clinic and get supervision to do some of these treatments on your own. So when I did it, I had a teacher who really, sort of mentored me. And then many years later now, I want to offer that to people as well, because it is work that is really hard to embark on your own.
Yeah, and it's very hard to find an apprenticeship. People get out
Yeah.
of school and they're kind of
Yeah.
they're not totally on their own, but it's not. there's a reason that the traditional way was, a continued
Yeah.
apprenticeship, because that's how you
Right.
really and hone your skills. Yeah.
Yeah, and I like to say, we go to a lot of CEU classes, and we get a lot of download of information. And I just took this one piece and I did it in the clinic over and over and over again. And now 20 years later, it's like I want to share that with others so that it doesn't take you as long as it took me to figure this stuff out. So I think in practice, it's much different than in theory. And so the theory is great, and it's great to get CEUs about theory, but we all know we have to somehow translate that into practice. And I always feel like my gift is that. Like I used to be a tech writer before I went into Chinese medicine. And so I like to take something super technical and then bring it into something that is like easy for us to learn and utilize. And that is the same as tech writing, really. That's really what it's about. It's
And
a
that's
help
a gift
file.
of a teacher. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So that's what I'm doing at the Alchemy Learning Center. We have ongoing programs that start every 6 months or so, and so we will take a new group through starting in September. So yeah, so that we have a clinic in Northampton, Massachusetts that's called the Alchemy Healing Center. And if you want to actually get supervision and you want to shadow, for example, a ghost point treatment, just be able to observe me doing the work, you can come to the Alchemy Healing Center and do that as an apprenticeship, program. So that's what we're offering in terms of that. So again, it's really about you can go and do it on your own. Everyone knows what the ghost points are. They're online, like anyone can use them. But are you going to just stick the needles in and leave the
But
room?
how to use them? How to,
Exactly.
I taught at the Worsley School for years, and all the beautiful poetic, spiritual sounding names and
Yeah.
qualities, attributes that are attributed to them. But it's how you're actually helping people to achieve those kind of results that you can't do from just reading the description. It
Yeah.
really it has to be an alchemical process for the practitioner too.
Absolutely. And just, when I started out, I actually started from more of the five element tradition. My mentor was part of the Worsley School in England. And so like I came at it from more doing internal devils, IDs and EDs, internal dragons and external dragons treatments, and then started incorporating the ghost points as another option. And then I started learning more and more. But going back to those days, I remember feeling terrified about doing my first IDs treatment. I imagine that a lot of people are scared in the beginning. We don't really understand it. We don't know what it's about, so we need a lot of hand holding in the beginning.
And also you're entering into territory of somebody's psyche that you really don't know what to expect, and
Absolutely.
you shouldn't just go charging in there. I know you know that.
Absolutely.
But
Absolutely. And I think that the important thing is to remember to, in the beginning, interestingly, you don't want to, you think you want to do the ghost points with the people that have the most obvious, disruptive things going on in their lives, either mentally, emotionally, or spiritually. But when you train, I'm really looking for people that are a little bit, you know, doing pretty well in their lives. They're not in deep crisis, because we don't want you to train with someone who's, everything is just so tumultuous in their lives. That's a very advanced, case, and you don't want someone new in that level of work quite at the beginning. So a lot of times when people take a class with me, they're like, "Oh, I'm going to go do this." And I'm like, "Okay, but pick someone that might just want to unload a little bit of a few skeletons in their closet, not a whole closet full of skeletons that are going to bust out and like,
right.
I mean, remember, it is a Pandora's box for some people, and there's no closing that box back up once it opens. And so You have to think about these. There's a lot of ethical issues to think about in terms of when you're doing this level of work. How do you feel about it? What do you think is right? And what is really going to be best for the client?
Yeah.
So there's
Now
a lot of,
we spoke about that on the phone. You know, if somebody comes to you for, you know, tendon and muscular pain, and you sense that it's something deeper, I'm thinking of that story you can tell them from
yes.
the book. But do you have to ask permission, or in your way of looking at things, you know, as opposed to just treating what you're seeing? Um, if you see
Right.
that there's something much deeper going on.
Right. So I tell the story of my golfer person who came in, and I said, you know, this elbow pain you're having, this golfer's elbow, you know, I is it possible it's emotionally based? And he kept saying, no, no, there's not. My life is great. There's nothing wrong. I just have this pain. It's my elbow. I just have this pain. And he kept pointing to one of the ghost points, large intestine 11. So we went round and round, and we did a lot of treatment. We did gua sha, we did cupping, we did all kinds of points, we did everything you can imagine. And he bless his heart, he came back. He kept coming back, and no change, no change, no change, which is usually a good indicator that you need to do this work. So finally, I said to him, "Look, you know, why don't we just try this emotional treatment? Let's just try it." You know, I didn't talk to him about the ghost points because that's kind of a little odd, and I knew it was a little bit out of his sort of frame of reference in the world. I didn't want to throw him off that way. And you know, honestly, it's just large intestine 11. I mean, you know, it's just another point. So I said, but this point, you know, this point might really help you. And in fact, I think we should do a series of points. I did all of the ghost points with him. And I said, let's do a series of points and just see. You know, we haven't gotten it yet, and you're still coming. So let's try this. So I did. And as soon as I got to large intestine 11, which I did it over, you can do the points over many treatments if you want. So the day that I got to large intestine 11, you know, he suddenly, out of the blue, started telling me about the fact that his secretary, who was a long term, many generational friend of the family, embezzled like $100,000 or something like that from him. And it was devastating. And that she was currently in court to be tried and go to jail about it. And so he said, yeah, I guess that is kind of an emotional thing. And and the next day, you know, he came back. The next day he came back, the pain was gone. So he became a convert, obviously. And we did all of the stages of alchemy together. And by the time he got to stage 6, like all the money concerns went by the wayside. He did, you know, he got like $1 million contract. He sold his house. Like all these things were happening, and he just couldn't believe it. It was just like, you know, my lucky stars or something, you know.
That's
But
one.
yeah, but I think that, you know, when you look at, you know, how people are unaware of
Mm.
these things that are lurking deep down, and they just think, oh, you know, my wife's good, my job's good, like, you know, they just don't necessarily think about it, but sometimes there's a lot there. And so do you have to say I'm doing this like really esoteric ghost point treatment? No, but you know, you don't want to lie to them. It's more about what's the language that they use. So
Mhm.
I don't try to shock people into thinking they're doing like really weird stuff. I'm just like, what's the language that helps them understand what you're going to do? And in fact, there's a ghost point called Ghost Market, Ren 24. And Ren 24 is about that there's a gift that you have that needs to get to only certain people in the world. You don't want it to go to the people who don't need it. You only want it to go to the people who need it. What are the words that are going to best express in a way that that person can receive the gift? So if you say a bunch of things that are very alarming to the person who needs the gift, they're going to be like, no, 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 no. So, you know, how I look at it is, how about, you know, just using words that the person can take in and can help them understand that, yes, I need large intestine 11, you know, does it need to be some big scary thing? Well, for some people, yeah. Some people come into my clinic and say, I'm possessed. You know, I have a possession and I know it. And then it's like, okay. So we need to use that language. I need to be able to express to them, yeah, we can work with possession. That's okay. Like that's what these treatments were traditionally for. So
And
of
are you
course we're
talking
going to do that.
about like a literal energetic
Yeah. Yes. So,
possession, or
yeah.
just that people get so obsessive that it becomes like a possession of thoughts
Both.
versus like an entity?
Right, both. So the ghost points are wonderful for obsession. In fact, that's my favorite way to use them is there are so many of us right now who need ghost points. Like, pretty much all of us, if you've been on this planet for like more than 20 years, it's pretty likely that you've had some events in your life that are haunting you from the past. So that's obsession. Like we can't let that go. And
Mm.
so that's what the ghost points are really miraculous for. In addition, if you actually have an entity, which is called a gwei, Gui, which is ghost, a gwei is a person that maybe died at some point and their spirit didn't go home, to heaven or wherever you want to think, and it sort of stayed around and then potentially got into someone else, and that is the Chinese medicine belief that that can happen. And whether you believe in it or not doesn't matter. The fact is that the person exhibits certain qualities that we would associate with that kind of possession. And so we say there's emotional possessions, and then there's these entity possessions. And
Mm.
then we would do different treatments depending on which one you might have. And that's really something that I've developed through practice. For example, I still use Worsley's IDs and EDs treatments, and I love them for particular cases. And then I like the ghost points for other cases. And they're all sort of in the same realm. They're all in this realm of you're not totally in charge of yourself. Whether you're obsessed or possessed, you're not really running the show. And that's kind of the level of that work.
Hmm. Hmm. So, I've heard alcoholism described as people, um, especially for people whose personality changes when they drink, that it's almost like there's an entity that wants to experience that sensation of drinking or drunkenness. And so they keep, um, they exert this control over the person. It's like somebody sitting on your shoulder, and that you really have to, for some people with drinking problems, you have to, you know do, if it's not a formal exorcism, somehow you have to deal with that energetically.
Yeah, and for alcoholism or any kind of drug, problem, I would say that there's two parts to it. There's probably something that is like a ghost. Again, it may just be the drugs influence on you, but something sort of taken over, like a possession or an obsession. So there's that. So I might do the ghost points. But then there's more to it with any kind of addiction, because there's often a reason why we got addicted. And
Yeah.
that is where I would do something called the 9 heart pains. And the 9 heart pains treatment is about loving yourself.
Mm.
And usually, what's behind an addiction is some kind of self hatred or self loathing or dissatisfaction with who you are. And so, that treatment is usually also necessary and really important.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, because that's getting it, and maybe in this case it could be a two-pronged route to the cause,
Yeah,
but yeah,
yeah.
but you need to get to the root cause no matter what.
And a lot
Yeah.
of people, um, when they're just sort of learning about alchemy, they don't understand. So we can talk about the points. The points are fascinating, they're interesting. But to do that treatment, that loving yourself treatment, for example, which I call the 9 heart pains treatment, you have to be so present and so sort of unprotected yourself, vulnerable yourself, so that that person can now take that in and start to love themselves. So that's a deeper level of cultivation, like we talked about. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's great. Well, Lita, I want to thank you so much. I know, taking
Thank
time
you.
out of your day for this, and,
Oh,
you
thanks for
do it
inviting
with
me.
such heart, energy, and humility. And so I'm looking forward, maybe we can do this again in June, and,
Okay,
looking forward to doing more things with you. So,
fantastic.
yeah. Well, anyway, thank you very much, everybody. Next week, it's Matt Callison and Brian Lau talking about, well, they always have great things. But we will see you soon. And thanks again, the American Acupuncture Council, and for all you listening. And I hope you'll look into this, because I think it's going to make you a better practitioner and a better person no matter what you're doing. So I'm signing out. Virginia Duran of luminousbeauty.com.
Thank
Bye
you,
now.
Virginia. Thank you.